Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and today we're back with another tier list video. We have here version 1.1's, my version 1.1 tier list rating of all the characters in the game so far. As of 1.1 right now, I'm at 30 stars, Memory of Chaos. I have almost every single character built at least at level 70. The only character I don't have is Clara on this account, but my sub account has it as well. We'll be talking about most of these characters too. So just a quick recap, like we do this every patch, and what happened in version 1.1, just a very quick summary. First things first, the one that carries over beyond like 1.2 and beyond is enemies' resistances actually got nerfed in version 1.1. That means we saw like debuffing characters, Pela, and for example March 7, all those that inflict debuffs on enemies, these characters all saw greater buffs compared to 1.0. And of course the Memory of Chaos changing buffs in the first part and second part of the Memory of Chaos so far, we are seeing that when you inflict debuffs on the enemies, there's a certain benefit, and this is reflected on characters' performance as well. Of course, in 1 day's time, I think once it resets, we'll be seeing the last part, which is mainly benefiting like healers. When characters are at 80% HP or higher, they will get a 50% or something, a very massive attack buff as well, if I recall correctly too. So what are these going to implicate? I'm going to be talking about that in a tier list as well. Then again, these are just my opinions. Feel free to share with me like your opinions as well in the comments below, but just do so respectively as well. I think it will really help the community grow as a whole. First things first, most of us are probably interested in the new characters, so let's talk about them first in version 1.1. Out of all of the characters in game, I'm not going to just tease you, and I'm just going to tell you upfront, like Luocha, in my opinion, is my top pick for version 1.1. In my honest opinion, he's probably like the best character in the game. This tier list is all the way up to S tier. I'm not going to do like 5 S's, 6 S's, is just redundant in my opinion. So like B all the way to S, and I'll tell you in between, I'll put it up on screen as well. To be really honest, this character is near perfect. I think this character is possibly the closest thing to perfection right now in Honkai Star Rail. He does everything. He heals, he does decent amounts of damage, for all from a supportive role. He's also able to cleanse the team. He also is able to remove buffs, and as you can see currently in the meta, it does revolve around a lot on that. He also scales up attack, meaning he benefits from buffers, for example like Yukong. He benefits from Asta, he benefits from Tingyun as well. Very strong kid in general. I think he's a pretty solid character. One of the biggest worries a lot of people had was his HP might be a bit too squishy, but as you can see here, I don't really have him built with any HP gear other than this 5-star light cone, which gives a bit of HP. His HP is pretty tanky, and even without like 5-star stats, you can swap it out for 1 HP main stat. You'll probably be good to go as well. More or less the complete character, very strong. I have a whole other many videos on the channel on him already. I think you guys should check it out if you want more details on that, but he's definitely S tier in my opinion. The other banner character doesn't fall too far as well. I think Silverwolf is also a really strong character. In my opinion, she's S tier, one of the strongest characters in the game so far. Possibly if you like were to be a free-to-play player without characters, and you have lesser character roster than I do, I think that she will likely be the best character in the game right now. But for me, because I'm a content creator, I have a lot of characters built, so maybe I don't feel like her utility as much as some other players in the game. So that is why like Luocha feels a lot better for me as well. But single target debuffs, amount of defense shredding on the enemy, ability to implant weaknesses, meaning that you can tackle a lot of content by just putting the weakness on the enemy. I think very solid as well. Super good character in my opinion, definitely S tier. Next up, another new character on the list, the 4-star Yukong. Now I'll give 2 ratings for this character. One is personally because I have her at E6. So E6 is very important, it's pretty big game changer, because once you have an ultimate ability, you basically can control or have her uptime almost close to 100%, and she will always be doing damage with her ultimate ability that gets her Roaring Bowstring passive, regardless whether you have like skill points or not, or whether it's her turn or not. So it's a very big deal at E6, and at E6, in my opinion, this character is probably a S- tier, so the second highest category as well. She does a lot of damage on the side. I think I was hitting like 40k plus with her ultimate ability with buffs on. A very solid character, considering that she's also coming from a supportive role, not supposed to be doing a significant damage of the team, especially if we think about likes of like Asta, Tingyun, as well as Bronya, who don't do nearly as much damage as her. Does also very strong amounts of imaginary toughness breaking on the enemy too. In my opinion, just a super good character at E6. At E0 on the other hand, I think without all of these additional buffs that she gets, like energy regen, speed increases, this one I think is like super good, and of course deal a little bit more damage to enemies here. She does feel a bit lackluster in the DPS component. In that sense, I'll probably rate her at E0, maybe somewhere around A or A-, in my honest opinion, not as flexible at lower Eidolon levels. But still a pretty strong character if you do need a bit of imaginary debuffs too. Okay, so now that we have all of those like main 3 characters out of the way, let's talk about maybe like a few other characters that I see as key winners, both from my experience in the Memory of Chaos as what I'm seeing around. And the first character I want to talk about is Welt. I think a lot of people are actually playing this character as a main DPS in version 1.1. He's very, very strong because he deals tons of damage in his overall kit, yet he's also good at inflicting a lot of debuffs. As we know, currently the Memory of Chaos really revolves around like inflicting debuffs on the enemy and to get even more strength as well. So for the first 2 parts, I think this character is really strong. In my opinion, he's probably S tier just because he deals a lot of damage, benefits from the Memory of Chaos buffs, changes from the enemies being slightly more nerfed, and imaginary benefiting a lot in version 1.1 because of how the second half tends to be. A lot of them are weak to imaginary as well. Especially if Yukong added to the game, Luocha added to the game, I think Welt also sees upside too with imaginary teams. Very, very strong. S tier in my opinion. Some other characters that I think also are really strong now is definitely Gepard. Gepard was all the while really strong, but in 1.0 I ranked him as my top character. Now when Luocha is in the game, I think he isn't ranked as high. Still S tier in my opinion. He has good control, good sustain and thick shield for the entire team. And his control in terms of like freezing enemies. Now with the enemy's effect res being nerfed slightly, he doesn't even require that much effect hit rate, and you can build more into like defensive stats or maybe even some offensive stats for this character. Very strong in my opinion. Still S tier, very, very solid character. Let's talk about like some other very strong characters that I see currently in the game, and another one would definitely be Yanqing. Yanqing is pretty strong because again, he has freeze in his kit as well, although it's a bit like RNG based, but still super strong, especially with the changes in the enemy's resistances being nerfed. Super good, and early, now it's like relatively early game, so a character that benefits from like 100% crit rate, more consistency, meaning you can just stack him up for crit damage and does tons of damage as well. Of course, little bit reliant on characters that give him a bit of protection, for example like Gepard, but you could also use March 7 if he was at lower life to not draw the aggro. Otherwise, I think Yanqing is a very solid and like reliable character to have. I'll rate Yanqing as also S tier in version 1.1 for these factors. Freeze characters generally do benefit quite well. Since we're on the line of like freeze characters, I might also just talk about the other ice characters in case I like slip and forget. I don't want to miss out any characters in this video too. Next up, March 7. I think March 7 also sees quite a bit of buffs, especially in the later floors where you need to cleanse off debuffs, or maybe you need to freeze enemies. Any of you who played March 7, for example, in 1.0 and playing her now, you realize that her freeze is actually much more reliable in her ultimate due to like the changes in the nerfs on the enemy, making her much more useful. I think she's pretty good as either as like a solo tank, maybe a double tank setup, a good cleanser as well. If you build her with enough speed, she actually can shield up multiple characters, and once you have her at E6 for example, she does become a pseudo healer, and that is actually how I played her for a little bit, just to cheese build her high amounts of speed. Just heals up a lot of characters too. It's quite funny because her shielding is actually very thick. For those of you who don't know, or maybe you don't use her, she actually has 57% defense scaling, and this is a level 10 and plus 760. In my opinion, I think she scales better with shielding for the single target compared to Gepard at equal investment in my opinion. But overall, I think this character has still aggro draw, so that makes it a bit more difficult to play with characters, for example like Ireland, which shielders generally work better with, and without E6 and she doesn't heal, I don't want to rank her on E6, so I'll rank her on anything like E5 and below. I'll probably think this character is like A or A- in my honest opinion. Definitely slightly better than she was before, especially since she is able to land her freeze, but then again her freeze is not 100% reliable. There's still like an RNG element to it. Unfortunately, it's more or less the same. She doesn't have freeze in the kit unless she breaks the enemy. Follow-up abilities didn't get buffed that much. In terms of AoEs, enemies do summon, but there are much better erudition characters that exist. I will rate this character as B tier. Unfortunate, very, very adorable character with her Kuru voice lines. now that we have finished like most of the ice characters, I think we are done with ice for now. Let's go into like the other characters. Oh wait, we have Pela too. I'll leave Pela a bit towards the after this, I guess. Let's talk about Seele first. Seele, in my opinion, like straight up S tier. I think she's still probably the best DPS in the game right now. Even if you have like cruising in the Stellar Sea, super strong. I think a lot of us know it as well. Won't go too much in depth. Still very solid. Still does a lot of damage right now, and especially when we have Silverwolf added to the game. I think she got a little bit better because Quantum can easily be dropped much more better on like enemies who weren't weak to Quantum as well. Pretty good, especially since you have a dedicated defense shredder for her too. So nothing much to talk about. Let's talk about Pela here. Out of all of the characters in the game, I think that Pela saw the greatest improvement from version 1.0 to 1.1. I'll rate Pela as S tier, possibly one of the highest rated 4-star characters, maybe other than Natasha, who's like a healer, which we'll talk about a little bit. Very strong Y, she has the ability to remove debuffs. I think where is that here? Is it here? Yeah, so it removes debuffs in her skill. She has AoE defense down in her ultimate ability, super strong as well, especially since like the first and second part of the Memory of Chaos relies on debuffs being more beneficial, and also since the last part gives attack of in terms of like Memory of Chaos buff, it gives a lot of attack. We might not need Harmony as much as we might rely on a defense shredder, since stacking attack buffs does have diminishing return, so inflicting defense break will still be reliable towards the end of version 1.1 as well. My opinion, is a very strong character, also freezes and does good amounts of damage. I built her a little bit for DPS, she does hit quite well as well. S tier for sure in my opinion. Since we talked about it a bit, Natasha, also S tier. Now, the only 4-star healer that is free for now in version 1.1. Of course, Lynx has been said to be a quantum healer 4-star that's coming up as well. I did a bit of thoughts on that and how it might affect the changes, but I think Natasha will still be relevant for now, next patch, and maybe the patch thereafter. S tier in my opinion, good cleanse, AoE healing. Not much alternatives, even with Luocha added into the game, I still think she's very fantastic. Since we already talked about 2 healers, let's talk about the last healer now. Bailu. Okay, I'm going to just give her S- tier. I think that Bailu now with Luocha coming to the game, I don't think she ranks as highly, and some of you might be offended by that. Let me give you 2 reasons. Firstly, she doesn't cleanse, and I see a lot of changes in the Memory of Chaos, for example, now requiring quite a lot of cleansing on your characters. Like in Memory of Chaos 10, we have Kafka Boss, which does require cleanse as well. If you don't play her in the second half, you likely will be playing her on the first half, and honestly, I think Natasha is pretty decent there too, and most other defensive units are pretty decent the first half in Memory of Chaos 10. I don't see that much benefit for her revive ability so far. She does good healing, but Luocha being an added game, if you have Luocha, I think most likely you'll be playing Luocha and Natasha, each one in one side. Maybe Bailu might not be utilized as much if you have the option to, of course, swap in between your healers as and when you want. That is my honest opinion. The cleanse does make a pretty big difference. Other than that, of course, Luocha's typing is a lot more beneficial with a good amount of breaking too. Still a very good healer, just has more competition now in version 1.1, S- tier in my opinion. Okay, out of all of these other characters, let's talk a bit about Fire MC. I think Fire MC is a tricky one to rate. Previously in version 1.0, I rate her as like very high, I think it was like S tier. But now with additional options, even for free to play if you picked Luocha up. So I'll give you 2. Like if you pick Luocha up, I think she's not as relevant anymore. Still probably useful if you play her together with like Fire MC in the same setup. But and Luocha can just take the other half on his own. So in that case, if you are having that experience, maybe like S- tier, not as the highest tier. But for those of us like skip Luocha, only still have 2 defensive options. Of course, this character is still S tier. But of course, with enemy resistance dropping, means that her taunt is slightly more reliable. But generally, I think most people do build a little bit of effect hit rate, maybe break effect 2 on this character, rather than like crit damage. So I wouldn't say it's like significant buffs to this character anyway. S- tier would probably be my rating for version 1.1. And to round up like this section up here, I think I'll talk about Tingyun. Tingyun, this is a tricky one. Every time I read about Tingyun, out of all the characters in the game, I think I'm not very satisfied with his kit. One thing for sure is I don't have his limited light cone, so that does affect like certain statistics of my impression of him. You could run him with Bronya as well as Tingyun in a hyper carry team. I do run him when I want to maximize his potential, but it's quite restrictive, especially if players who don't have maybe Bronya, Tingyun, and you are left with either one. His inflexibility does make him very difficult to utilize, but for those of you who have like the perfect setup for him, he's still definitely like a S- tier DPS if you have the perfect setup. If you're missing the hyper carry team, like you don't have Bronya, you don't have Tingyun for him, and maybe you're running him on his own and you're trying your best to maximize this character with your unfortunate roster, I think he will be feeling like a A character. Would probably be my rating without hyper carry. Bronya, I think Bronya is still S tier, very strong amount of crit damage buffing, attack buffing your team, boosting the team. Memory of Chaos is all about turn manipulation, so Bronya is still extremely solid. S tier without a doubt. Himeko. I talked about Himeko in meta, whether she's ever going to be meta, and unfortunately for a lot of fans, 1.1 is not that occasion. She's still, I don't think very important, because fire break damage can be found in Fire MC, can be found in Asta as well. So Himeko's kit still is not as relevant until we see more fire weakness, maybe like a requirement to have full fire meta teams. She does come more in the meta, but for now I'll probably rate her as an A- tier. I can see her popping off one day. Today is not the day, not in 1.1. Another character who is not in his meta right now will probably be Sampo as well. I probably will rate Sampo maybe as an A- tier for version 1.1. I do think he's a strong character. He just needs more specialist characters like Kafka to perhaps come in the game. I think you will see a lot more value in this character too. Does quite a lot of toughness breaking damage. If you don't maybe have Danheng build, you don't have Blade, I think he's another avenue, especially if we see much more enemies who are weak to wind. Definitely will be coming into the meta a little bit more. But for now, DOT is not really a thing. I will rate him as A- tier for now, but I'll definitely see myself pushing him higher in version 1.2, especially now that we know the roster coming up. Tingyun, I think Tingyun is still very strong, very solid character to give a lot of buffing to the team. The one issue with Tingyun, I think, in 1.1 is that debuffs become more relevant. So unless you are able to do more than just buffing, you might as well just run a debuffer who is able to, for example, either use more utility, like maybe shredding resistances, implanting weaknesses, or removing enemy buffs. I think you will probably favor these two characters a little bit more than the Harmony character, especially in like the first two parts of 1.1. So in my opinion, I think Tingyun got a slight decrease in terms of rating compared to the debuffers, just because of how you only can have 4 characters in the team. Of course, you can play both a debuffer and an attack buffer in the same team, but of course that does mean that your sustain is quite a little bit lacking. For that reason, I'll name Tingyun as S-, just for the sake of the changing meta in the Memory of Chaos. Once we go into 1.2, I do see that changing and she will likely continue to increase, but now, unless we for some reason have more slots in the team, I think that debuffers currently reign supreme in 1.1 for the most part anyway. Asta, same reason as Tingyun, for most of the same reasons. But other than that, she also does increase the speed of the entire team quite greatly, especially dance. For that reason, I'll rank her on the same category as Tingyun, probably S- also, even though not doing as much of a hyper carry role compared to Tingyun. I think turn manipulation is still very valuable because it's indirectly giving your whole team more turns to clear faster, do more damage, and as well as also giving more energy restoration to your whole party. That's why I would say they are more or less even in this setup. Next up, we have Sushang. Sushang, again, is the only solid physical damage dealer other than Clara, as well as physical MC. I don't consider Natasha as a good toughness breaker. A lot of people have been building her more for effect hit rate, and she can pretty much solo anything that is physical weakness and consistently like get them broken. If you have her at higher Eidolons like E1 especially, you do get quite a lot of value because it doesn't consume any skill points, making her a lot more flexible. This character can fit the most teams. I really like this character, super independent as well. In my opinion, I'll probably rate her as S- just for the lacking of physical characters in the game, and also there are only 4 Han characters in the game so far, that being Danheng, herself, Yanqing, as well as Sushang. Very solid. If you have Clara, her tier probably will drop to A or A+, because you probably will be playing Clara for that physical element. Otherwise, if you don't, she will probably be your only way to address physical reliably as small spender or free to play. So S- tier if you don't have Clara. Danheng. Danheng, I think, was really strong in 1.0, especially since the speed down is very valuable. But now with if you have, for example, Welt, and he's coming more into the meta, if you don't have Welt, I think his value will still remain very strong, especially since with the enemy's effect rest requirement being much lower now compared to before, he can just solely build for damage and speed down quite reliably as well. I think that Danheng is still solid, but win enemies seem to have reduced as well in the Memory of Chaos, and that is why I think I'll bring his tier list down. I'll probably put him as an A+ tier. By now we probably would have pretty well invested Seele, and maybe we have a secondary damage dealer in the set. If you have, for example, like Sushang, I think Sushang ranks higher than Danheng, and that is why I'll rate Danheng as A+. Still a pretty solid character, good amounts of speed down for the enemy team. But for now, win is not a very popular element, and that is why I will rate him slightly lower as well. Next up, we have Arlen. Arlen did see a bit of gain when Luocha as well as Yukong came into the meta a little bit, especially since he doesn't use any skill points in his skill ability. That is something good to know. Overall, if I put him at B, he's going to be at same tier as Herta, but I do think he requires quite a lot of investment in terms of Eidolons, good amounts in his light cone as well to actually start to become much more useful. I much rather like a character like Serval who really pops off much more quicker. For that, I'll rate probably Arlen as a B+, A- tier. If I were to settle for one, I'll probably give him a B+, just because you really need the right setup, like maybe Gepard, Luocha, Bailu to emergency revive him, or in the right conditions, March 7 as well, for him to really see value. Definitely still higher than Herta in terms of usability, in my opinion. That's how I'll rank him as a B+. Since we talked about a lightning character, let's talk about Serval. Serval is a very strong character, even at E0 and E6, she just really becomes a monster with a lot more damage as well. Applies shock very well. I do see this character becoming even stronger in 1.2, and since the changes to how it works, shock is now much more easily to be applied because of the nerfs to enemy effect rest. She definitely saw a bit of gain there. If I would rank her as S-, she'll be on the same tier as Jingyuan, which I don't think is the case. For that reason, I'll probably put her as A+, comparatively. Of course, if you compare her across like other A+ characters and DPS characters, I think she will be like a very high A+, probably a very solid character in my opinion so far. Pretty versatile, has a very low burst cost requirement as well. We talked about Herta already, we have two characters left now. But first, let me talk a bit about Clara. I'll just use Hook here as a proxy and then we'll go on to Hook because I don't have her on this account. I think Clara is super strong right now in the meta. Very good amounts of value. From what I see for a lot of people in my Discord as well, if you are interested in joining, please do join the video description below. We really have a very nice community going. Really appreciate you joining too. We also do like giveaways, account reviews there, so for those of you who are interested in those kind of stuff, do hop by if you're interested too. Clara, I see a lot of people clearing with them with Memory of Chaos. Works very well, especially with new characters being added into game like Luocha. I think still tons of value. And for the fact that there are very little physical damage dealers right now, I think she still sees a ton of value as well. So in my opinion, I think Clara will be a S- tier or S tier. Since Tingyun is a S-, I probably will put Clara in S tier. I think she's very solid, especially with the arrival of Luocha. Your other set also, and she doesn't take out any like speed requirements, which means you can give it a lot to your other teams. In my opinion, that is something worth considering. So that is for Clara. I think I'll rate her as probably like S tier. And for Hook, onto Hook now, as you can see, getting a bit impatient with me. But Hook here, E6, I have her at E6. She's a very strong damage dealer, does a lot of damage on her own destruction character in general. But for now, I don't think it's her time to shine. Maybe when we have more requirements for destruction characters, the buff like maybe revolving around destruction, which might be in 1.2, who knows, since it's Blade and Arlen going to be on the banner, maybe destruction will get some sort of buff. In that case, Hook will see upside in future, but not 1.1. I think 1.1 Hook is still an okay DPS. I'll probably rate her at A-, just because she is a strong character and stronger than Arlen for sure, but maybe not on par with other A tier characters on this list, and definitely not A+. I wouldn't say like as versatile as Serval either. And last but not least, I saved Qingque for last. This is I think she was on the banner recently as well, and a lot of people have been like getting her at E6. For me, currently I only have her at E5. I'll be waiting for once the last Eidolon is going to appear for her in the shop, so I'll pick that up there. recovers 1 skill point after using enhanced basic attack. Gives good amounts of refund for her, but the one that increases her damage a lot is actually E4. So her rating will differ very greatly if you have her at E6 compared to only just E3 or maybe like just E4 as well, because this is really quite making up for her overall kit in general. I think that this character, in my opinion, at E0 is quite bad because she drinks a lot of skill points. If you don't have Seele, probably her rating will go up quite a bit, especially since it's your only way to address Quantum. If you don't have, for example, Silver Wolf, don't have Seele, then her value does go up a little bit. But at E0, I think that this character probably would be a A or A minus tier. I'll just put it as maybe A tier in my opinion. A standard DPS, okay, but does require some setup and skill point funneling into this character to really pop off. Once you have her at E4 as well as E6, I think she gets a lot stronger. And if you don't have Seele or Silver Wolf, I think she's an S- tier DPS for a 4-star. But if you do have Silver Wolf or Seele, I think she isn't that high. Maybe A+ tier. Most people would rather run, for example, Seele. And those are my honest thoughts for this tier list of how it changes with the meta. Tier lists are never constant, they always change based on like whatever is ongoing. So if you watch this video like 2 months, 3 months from now, it'll be totally irrelevant because it's based on what is actively going on and the new characters being added. If you appreciate such content, I do this every single patch. Like and subscribe for more of such future videos, and I think you might be interested in these 2 other videos right here for future things coming up in version 1.2. Thanks so much for watching, see you in the next video.